Let's take a moment to talk about taxiing. Taxiing means moving the aircraft on the ground under its own power. In particular, getting from the ramp out to the hold short point on the edge of the runway. Steering on the ground is managed through the rudder pedals. That's right. Unlike driving a car, we turn by using our feet. Okay, ready? With the throttle idle, release your parking brake. Okay. Now gently increase throttle to get the aircraft moving.
Just kind of show you guys a little bit of what it is in the initial stages of flight training. I will say a lot of this stuff, and I'll speak to it at the time, is very,
Ease
very
up on your
pertinent.
throttle a bit.
So
Use your
hope you all
rudder
enjoy
pedal
this
to
video.
turn left and enter the taxiway. As you increase power, watch the tachometer and make sure to stay around 1,000 RPM.
So taxiing is a very common part of flying. Believe it or not, you'll be driving the airplane a good amount of the time, even though all of us pilots would much prefer to have the aircraft airborne. So he's just going over some basic things. My instructors have always told me, keep the nose wheel on the center line, and that's, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Rudder pedals are how you steer. They have independent brakes. So
Now test the brakes.
it's a little, it's different than driving a car. As a matter of fact, if you
Good.
are dealing
Brakes
with a crosswind, you set your ailerons to deflect against the crosswind. So it's called a crosswind correction while taxiing. And I blocked out the yoke here because I have my own flight control and there's no wind in the simulator. But if there was, you would see me as I move in various areas, potentially doing a crosswind correction in. And that's done to make sure that a gust of wind doesn't cause the airplane to weather vane. So that's where the broadside of the aircraft obviously has more drag, the wind can hit it, and it will cause the aircraft to turn in a direction that is not desired by the pilot.
All right, taxi to holding point Alpha 1 next. It's at the far end of the airport, near the head of runway 21. Stay as close as possible to the taxiway center, marked by the yellow line, and watch your speed.
And as with any time you're going through an intersection, you always want to just look both ways, confirm that there's no other aircraft that are taxiing. It's rare, but sometimes people can get confused or disoriented, and there can be an incursion. Sometimes it's an incursion over the active runway, which is not good, and that requires the tower to file a report anytime that occurs. But sometimes it can just simply.
After the right turn, come to a stop before the hold short point in prep for takeoff. You've mastered that lesson. The next challenge will be to keep the aircraft under control while at full throttle for takeoff.
Alright, so one thing I don't like right at the beginning of this one is my fuel level is less than a half a tank, which is concerning. I don't know why my instructor is approving of this flight.
No matter how many
Also,
hours
my
I've
oil
logged,
temperature has
Takeoff
not
still
gone up
puts
at
a
all.
smile on my
And we
face.
should have completed
Taking
the
off
engine
is not
run-up
especially
by this
difficult
point. So
if you
we should have
remember a
already
few basic
put the
principles.
engine at
First,
maximum
whenever
power
possible,
and
take
we
off into the wind. No matter how many hours I've logged, takeoff still puts a smile on my face. Taking off is not especially difficult, if you remember a few basic principles. First, whenever possible, take off into the wind. This won't be an issue on a calm day like today. Second, before you enter a runway, always make sure it's clear. Check to the right to see if a vehicle is on the runway, and to the left to make sure no other planes are approaching. All right. No cross traffic to contend with. You're clear to taxi. Now slowly taxi onto the runway and align the plane with the center line. Then stop your plane just after the number 21.
Okay, so we've pulled onto the runway. We would not really spend time here. I don't know why they had us stop on the runway. That's just a little unusual. Typically, my instructors say when tower's cleared you to go on the.
All right, you're clear for takeoff. Apply full power, and I'll step you through the process. Great job. All right, you're clear for takeoff. Apply full power, and I'll step you through the process. Try to stay on the center line using your rudder. Continue pushing power until you reach 55
So the three
knots.
gauges I'm paying attention here is my heading indicator. So that heading indicator really needs to be on 2-1. So I've deviated a little bit to the right. My airspeed, which is in the top left, you can see that's holding
Good.
perfectly
Now
around
pull back
75
gently
knots.
on the yoke.
And you'll notice some adjustments on my artificial horizon. That's because I'm going to try to get the runway heading back where I'm straight down,
Back on the yoke
down the
to
beam.
take off.
It's not unusual for during takeoff
it.
for the aircraft to
Airborne.
drift some off of that centerline runway heading. That can happen due to, say, some light winds
up the top of your
that may be
instrument panel
impacting
so
the
it's a couple
airplane.
of inches
But
above the
more
horizon.
often, it's the
That'll pitch
P
us up
factor or it's
and
the
set a
torque
good
of the
climb
propeller
altitude.
that has the tendency
Focus
to
on flying
pull an
straight.
aircraft in
Use your
one
rudder to
direction
keep the runway
that
heading up
causes
to
that.
110
And as a
degrees.
pilot, we just have to
If
give
you
the
maintain
appropriate
75
amount
knots,
of
you'll
opposite
reach the
rudder
target
in order to
altitude of
counter
5,500
the
feet
P
in no
effect.
time.
And that is still something I'm trying to find that sweet spot. I'm much better at it than I was. And honestly, when I take off in real life, we have windows in the very back of the cockpit. So I like when I'm doing my takeoff climb, I'll just take a brief moment. I'll look behind the I'll look right out the back windows and see, okay, am I right down the runway? If I am, awesome. I did.
Maintain 75 knots and climb to 5,500 feet. Okay, 5,500 feet. You've reached your target altitude. That was a nice takeoff.
Stick landing is a simulated engine failure. So this is something that any good trainer is going to unexpectedly do to you at any point. So I've had two separate trainers at my flight school, both who have just randomly pulled the throttle,
For this landing
any
exercise,
portion
I
of
want
this
you to focus on the yoke.
runway operation, and
We're
said,
close
okay,
enough to
your
the
engine just
runway to
died.
land safely
Get
without
us on the
adding
ground
any
safely.
throttle.
and
Maintain a speed of around 65 knots.
that's what a dead stick
Pitch down
landing
if
is.
you're going
So
too
with a dead
slow.
stick landing, you
Pitch
have
up if
no
you're too fast.
you have no throttle. You have your pitch. You have the fact that you're currently flying, which you use to your advantage, and then you hit what's known as a glide slope. In Cessnas, Cessna 172 and apparently the Cessna 150, the glide slope is 65 knots, and that gives you your best rate of glide, meaning that if you are at 65 knots, then you will be able to cover the largest amount of area before your plane comes back down to Earth, before gravity kicks in. So you want to use that time to find a suitable landing strip or area. I mean, it can be an interstate if it has to be, and to safely get your plane back down. One thing my instructor told me, which I thought was kind of interesting, it doesn't show it here, is that flaps are never used on a dead stick landing until this is assured. So right now where I am, I'm about to touch down. So here I could use flaps if I chose to.
Now focus on the end of the runway
I'm going to,
and pull back slightly on the yoke to aim the
basically
nose
just
just
flaps
above
rob
it.
you of your airspeed, so you don't want to do that in a engine failure type of scenario. Well, folks, this is going to
There you
conclude
go.
it for the video.
Now,
I hope you
apply the
have
brakes to
enjoyed
slow
it,
down
and
and
hope
bring
to
the
catch you in the next
aircraft to a
video.
stop.
Bye.
All right. Great job.